being putting yourself out there can be of benefit to you, both as a researcher and as a PI, and even in terms of public engagement. So this is a really interesting project. This paper was actually published just last week, and it's been doing the rounds on Twitter. That's kind of again supporting that confirmation bias. But essentially, these folks, for the guts of a year, followed papers that were shared on Twitter and tweeted by accounts versus those who weren't, and basically showed that papers that were tweeted, put out there into the world, and spoken about in kind of threads are more likely to be cited and are more likely to be cited at a higher rate than those who weren't. Now, there's a lot of conversation about, is this fair? You got the old dudes who don't know what Twitter is, who are like, this is ridiculous. It's an unfair advantage. And the way I see it is, science is already unfair. There's already a boatload of competition. So why not, if this is an option, use it as a way of putting yourself out there and a way of making yourself known. At the end of the day, there's a lot of fantastic postdocs that are in the area of exercise oncology that know as much as me. I just procrastinate enough to put myself out there on Twitter, and that has resulted in me getting some sort of visibility through my work. And so that's the way I view it, is, whether or not it's fair, whether or not you agree with it, it is what it is. So you might as well take advantage of it. And there's a really cool concept that I like, is this idea of the breadth of audience you have. So when we go to conferences, we talk to the same 20 people every year, and we all go to different rooms and we explain different areas of our research, and that's cool. But for a lot of us, and my work in particular, it's reliant on us putting our work out to the masses and giving people insight into what it is, what it means to be in the area of exercise oncology. What are the tips around safety of exercise during different types of treatment? How can we manage these treatment side effects? And so for me, there's a real value in going beyond the scientific community, getting myself out there into the public. And there's this kind of trend that occurs, that the more followers you accrue, the more people you start to engage with, you do start to diversify your audience. So it goes from being just your small pocket of scientists and maybe some people of the public, to having a more even split across the board, where you're getting public and other media groups involved as well. So unless you're like a superstar like Ellen Gray, idiots like me aren't necessarily getting our work picked up by mainstream media, because we're running kind of smaller pilot trials. I'm still early in my career. I'm not doing the big fancy pants $1 million NHMRC studies. But if I consistently put my work out there, I have been picked up by various media sources as a representative of the field. So I can talk more broadly about the field in addition to my specific research interests. So I think that's a really cool way of kind of, again, getting attention both for yourself as a scientist and as your field in general. And I'll offer this caveat. So there's a guy called Kevin Kelly who has a really cool concept for creatives that talks about this idea of 1,000 true fans. And it addresses this concept in people who are creators and YouTubers and different things like that, where there's a desperation to get X number of followers. You chase numbers and it's never enough, and I need to get more. And the idea with the 1,000 true fans is that Kevin Kelly makes a really good case that you can make a sustainable career if you've got consistent followers, if you've got people who are consistently engaging with your content and buy into what you're doing, what you're speaking, and your authenticity, you can sustain a good kind of living. I would flip that in the scientific perspective of saying, and it may not even be 1,000 for you, but what you do need is the core group of people that engage in your work. And that may just be the people who are in your area of research. So for me, it may just be the 100 people in the world who are researching exercise oncology. If I can get 60, 70, 80 of them, and we're regularly having dialogue, regularly engaging in content, I'm regularly sharing my work to them, those true people who are engaging me and consistently following along with my work, they're the ones that are going to share my work, engage in my work, and ultimately, if that's what you care about, be referencing what you do as well. So that's the caveat, because I think there can be this artificial or chase to artificial numbers, and it doesn't really mean anything unless there's engagement with it. So in terms of network and collaboration, it can be really cool as well. So this is I'll explain how to do this in a few slides, but this is a thread I wrote on this idea of muscle mass and cancer. And coming towards the end of my time here at ECU, I disagree somewhat with the folks at Emory on how much we can actually shift muscle mass and cancer. And so I wrote this kind of tweet or thread on Twitter of explaining my rationale and all this type of context to it. And what happened was, you know, it did all right in terms of engagement, but what I started to see were people pinging me from different disciplines, from different countries, and people that I didn't necessarily collaborate with before, connect with before, that started to message me and go, you know, that's something along the lines that I've been thinking, or we're digging into this project. And since that, and this was in April, I've had 3 different opportunities to either be a part of different studies that are in the design development stage, or be on the part of several papers as well. So that to me is literally, for me, I wouldn't have had those 3 different opportunities if I didn't put that out there. So again, it's just a way of putting yourself out there into the world. We're in Perth, Western Australia, the most isolated city in the world. I think this can be a really valuable way of getting your content out beyond your little pocket of researchers that you already know. And again, you know, in particular relating to ECRs, I think it's more critical than ever that we develop our own unique voice, our own unique perspective on our fields. And some of those perspectives may differ from our PIs, and that's completely okay. That's part of the scientific process. But by putting yourself out there, you are able to put your stamp on things. You are able to identify yourself before others put you in a category that you may not fit in. And again, as I said, the idea of collaboration with scientists outside of your media area. So I'm in exercise oncology, but that's got a lot of crossover between exercise and aging in other clinical populations such as COPD and diabetes and things like that. So if I put out concepts relative to what I do, and someone from cardiac rehab goes, you know, we actually have this kind of rehabilitation process that's similar to you, then we can start to maybe look at collaborations that way as well. So I think it's a really cool way of kind of using that to put yourself out there and get yourself exposed to people you might otherwise not have been. And again, for ECRs, job hunting is massive on Twitter. So regularly I see this where people are posting postdoc positions, they're posting assistant professor positions that aren't necessarily showing up on email lists. They're not necessarily showing up on job boards. And this to me is critical, that literally, and again, you can talk about being fair or unfair, but if you're not on Twitter and if you're not following these type of people that are advertising their vacancies, you might miss out on really great opportunities. Or there may be people out there that you didn't even know exist, but you're actually a really good fit for, and you just come across it that way. So to me, I think it's a really cool tool because you're accessing these advertisements or these jobs that you may otherwise not have access to. And it provides unique visibility. So if you were to look at hiring me, for example, you can go back through my timeline. You can look at my philosophy. You can look at my perspectives on the field because of a history of that in my timeline. So in addition to meeting a PI at a conference and you have your 5 minutes and your coffee with them and you try and, you know, show your worth, this is going beyond that. And this is putting yourself out there, and you have developed a brand and a perspective on the field that people may or may not agree with. But if it's something that I align with, I'm like, geez, yeah, you know, Ben's got some great stuff. He's done some really good work. I've following him for a couple of years, so I know he'd be a good fit. And in the reverse, for if you're a PI, you have that perspective where if you're following along, and there's a lot of kids out there who have got great and unique perspectives on research. So you're exposed to their philosophy and their way of thinking and their perspective on the research before you even meet them. So you've got a better idea of if they're a suitable candidate or not. So I think it's a really cool way of, again, leveraging social media to try and build your your portfolio for jobs. This is, I think, one of the coolest things about Twitter. So it is, I've learned more about stats and research design from being engaged with people on Twitter than I have in the majority of my PhD studies. And I took formal coursework on statistics and research methods, because there's a ton of fantastic people out there that are putting some great content that's almost always free. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So there's a lot of work now, obviously, in open science, and people looking to improve the way we design, develop, and disseminate our research, and really trying to get people early on bought into this idea of open science and how to have good practices. So there's regular webinars, there's regular conversations on Twitter about how we go about do this, and especially in relation to kind of discipline specific, particularly in relation to psychology and exercise science. There's a lot of really great people in my field, and I would imagine this idea persists across different disciplines, that take the time to offer these in-depth threads on nuances of their field. So Grant Tinsley in my area is a big body composition researcher. So he has a lot of great experience context of some of the finicky nuances of measuring body composition that doesn't necessarily appear in publications, because I'll relate it back to open science. A lot of people don't put it in because it doesn't fit, or they put it they kind of cover over some of these nuances. Grant has regularly put out threads like this where he goes into detail of things you need to consider if you're assessing it. So people with a peripheral interest in body composition look at this and they take away tips that are like, man, yeah, that's how I could actually improve how I assess people in my research. And then you've got regular people coming out and talking again about opportunities that exist in terms of grants and funding. They also regularly put in tips of how you can better format your grants, and kind of behind the curtain scenes of what grant review panels are like, which again I think are really cool for ECRs in particular. And then again, you've got discipline specific. So our own Dr. Nymphius does some fantastic content regularly, and people put out webinars on their specific discipline. And oftentimes, to get this content otherwise, you would need to be going to conferences. You would need to be seeing these people in person deliver this stuff. So to have this out there, and if you're following and engaging with these people, you get access to this for free. I think it's just a phenomenal way of continuing our education and staying engaged and staying upskilled in different areas. And again, that's contingent on who you follow and who you engage with. But there's a boatload of people out there that regularly do this, which I think is really cool. And again, in my field, it's a little bit different, but we regularly look for participants for research through Twitter. So in cancer, for example, there are a ton of cancer support groups in and on Twitter that have a lot of patients in there. So if we're looking at the psychosocial impact of a treatment diagnosis on quality of life, we can start to tag these support groups and tag these people on Twitter and try and get more people into our surveys. Again, there's a lot of context in terms of like the type of people you capture. You're more capturing people who are more likely to find it and all that type of stuff. But at the same time, I think it's one of those things where it's like, why wouldn't you use that as an additional part of what we do? And I think this is really important. So a lot of grants now are looking to having lay language summaries. And a lot of us, when we're writing abstracts for conferences, are very restricted in what we can say and how much we can say and the word count we can have. Twitter allows you to have 280 characters. And that requires a great deal of brevity, and it requires you to be concise in what you're saying. So for me, at least, using Twitter, understanding that the people that are engaging with me are a combination of researchers and layperson, it requires me to write in a way that's accessible to everyone. And that has indirectly influenced my writing in that way, such that the lay language summaries for grants is a lot easier. The way I communicate with the public is a lot easier because it's a skill that we don't get taught as scientists. As scientists, we get taught to talk in this formal, antiquated way to other nerds at conferences, and we don't get taught to speak to regular people. And so this is a way of kind of training us indirectly to try and improve that as a skill. So I think, to me, all of those, whether all of them or one of them individually spoke to you, I think they're examples of how or why Twitter can be really valuable to you or your lab in terms of engagement, in terms of, I suppose, exposure as well. Now we'll talk about the how, and this is directed at people who I'm assuming have, never seen a Twitter account before. So we'll walk you through the absolute basics. If I log into my Twitter on the web, this is what I'll see. So there's some core components here. You can have your background and your header image, and that can be whatever you want. If you're an egotistical maniac like me, you'll have your picture of yourself twice. This could be a picture of your campus. It could be a picture of, I don't know, your dog or the outdoors or something. You then have your bio, so you're limited in terms of characters here, but you can talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff. Then you also can put in a link, whether that's to your faculty research page or your own website or whatever you want to direct people to. So when they click on your profile, they'll see all of that and they can click in. And then you can have your handle. So, I would suggest having your handle as close to your name as possible. There's a lot of really weird handles out there, and unless your bio is really clear that you're a real person, you're likely to lose or not at least get the same engagement and followers. And I will say this looks a little bit different than, say, LinkedIn, because it is social media. Twitter is different than LinkedIn because it's professional, but it's not Facebook, right? So Facebook, you're showing pictures of your kids and your dogs, and you're only keeping your close friends on there. Whereas Twitter is kind of like a middle ground between both, where LinkedIn is super professional. You don't really have any personal stuff on there. Twitter allows you to have this little bit of a blend of both. So it's a little bit more social. You can show a bit more of your personality and flavor in there. So I would encourage you to embrace that, because the people who are out there, who are getting the most engagement are the ones that are humanizing science, that are showing that we're people behind the work. And so I think that's a really important thing to take away from this kind of website or platform, I guess. So if you write a tweet, as I said, you've got 180 or 280 characters. So as you're writing, this is where your text goes. If you hit that @ symbol, anyone you're following or anyone really, you can tag them. So people can click on the tweet and they can go straight to that person's profile, or that person can comment if you're looking to engage with them. You can also post links to relevant, if you're talking about a specific paper, you can post a link to the paper. And then there's a bunch of different, additional elements to it. So you can attach a photo if you want. You can attach a GIF if you're so inclined to GIFs. You can write a poll. So if you're polling people, was this Twitter seminar good or not? You can tell people what you felt about there. You can chuck up emojis if you're an emoji person. Quite a polarizing topic among scientists, whether we think emojis are prevalent. Scheduling or drafting, I'm going to talk about that next, because I think that's a really cool feature that's just new to Twitter. You can add a tweet, so you can add, I think it's up to 25 tweets in a full thread, which I think is really cool. Obviously not to be abused, but you can add tweets. So if you run out of space here, you can put a separate one below it, and it will link them together in this nice thread that people can follow. And then once you have that, you hit your publish and you're good to go. So there's also filters you can use. So if you hashtag, and there's a boatload of common hashtags like PhD chat or academic Twitter, that if you search this, if you put this hashtag in the search bar, it will pull up a lot of anyone else who's using that hashtag. So it serves as a really good filter. So obviously you've seen all the stuff going on recently with George Floyd over in America, has brought up a ton of conversation about racism and prejudice in academia. This hashtag is a way to get engaged in that content and see what people are experiencing as academics, and people are giving a lot of great tips on how we can improve the inclusivity and diversity of our disciplines. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of how to tweet. And then you can talk about how you engage with other people's tweets. So, and again, coming back to content, this guy, Dr. Buckingham, put out a great resource recently that was basically a free comprehensive book on psychology. But again, PhD, ECRs, broke grad students, there you go. That's a really great resource for you. So if I see Gavin tweeting something and I want to engage in it, what I can do is retweet it. So if you see this up the top here, it says you retweeted. That will show up in my timeline. And I'll show you that in the next slide here. So basically, I like it so much that I felt it was relevant for my followers to see. So I put it on my timeline. I retweeted it. There also is an option when you click this button to retweet with a comment. So instead of just saying you retweeted, there was some text appear up here being like, check this out, Gavin did some great stuff, check out this resource or whatever. If I don't want to retweet it and I just want to say, you know, good job, Gavin, I can like it as well, I can favorite it. I can also comment and say, you know, thanks for this resource, and that will show up below on his timeline. Or I can send via direct message. So for whatever context, if you don't feel the need to have your engagement public, you can direct message Gavin, or you can send it to one of your mates or one of your colleagues on Twitter and direct message them and say, you know, check out this resource. It could be really cool. And then there's a bunch of other options where you can block, mute, and report anything you see kind of that's inappropriate or offensive or whatever it is. You can kind of use these tools here as well. So as far as your timeline goes, again, you look at, this is how my profile looks, and it just has this kind of vertical timeline. So anything I engage with appears on my timeline. So whether I retweet something, whether I write something, it appears in this timeline here. So if I like something, very importantly, it will show up. So you have to be very careful about what you're engaging with, and understanding that this is visible to a lot of people. So it's just, you're all brilliant people. I don't think you'd be engaged in anything, you know, necessarily off the walls, but just be careful about what you're engaging with, because it will be visible to anyone who follows you. So some kind of tips and tricks and you know, do's and don'ts of what I've learned. As I mentioned, Twitter is social media. And we forget as scientists the social part. So I feel kind of weird talking about this stuff because it's not something that I set out to do, and I'm certainly not an expert in it. I'm just an idiot that kind of keeps putting myself out there, and by, you know, some sort of fluke, it's happened to be successful. So to me, to be successful on social media requires authenticity. And you may be more or less outgoing than I am. You may be an introvert. You may have different views than I do. If you try to be me, or if I try to be you, it doesn't last. And if you're consistently putting yourself out there in a way that's not authentic to you, it is exponentially more exhausting than just putting yourself out there as you are. So it is critical in my mind, with the same kind of perspective, we have to humanize science. We have to show people that it is people behind the publications and the work that we're doing. And that requires us to be authentic, whatever authentic means to you. If you're not genuine, it's not going to last for you, and it's certainly not going to get much engagement because people can see through it. And then I'd kind of offer the addition of value. So it's very, very apparent when you're on Twitter who is on Twitter for selfish reasons versus actually wanting to engage with people. And the people who are on there for themselves and not trying to actually add value, they don't get a lot of engagement. They don't last long. And so the combination of these two really, I think, is not necessarily all you need to know. But if you get these two right, it's very hard to go wrong on social media. But I'll offer some kind of additional pitfalls. This is probably the most common account I see from kind of newer people, because you don't necessarily know how to engage it. You don't know what Twitter is. So what people will do will just go check out our new paper and put a link to a PubMed URL. And why? We know how to use PubMed. I know how to search for your work. If you're offering just a link of like, we just studied this paper, or we just published this paper, I'm not offering any context or nuance or additional information, I don't need to follow you. I don't need to engage with you on Twitter. I'll just go to your PubMed profile and check stuff out. And this is one of the most common accounts that I see. and probably the least engaged with, because there's no reason for me to follow or engage with your work, because you're just posting your own work and you're just posting links to scientific papers. I can read the papers. Let's talk about some of the challenges you had in that study, or let's put out someone else's work and go, this is really cool or really interesting work. And that kind of leads into the next section or topic, is only promoting your own work. Twitter is social media, and the longer you're on there, you kind of see these trends, and it almost becomes embarrassing, where people will log in only when they publish a paper, and they'll log in only to promote their own work. And to me, I attribute a lot of my quote unquote kind of, success on there as a product of me celebrating other people's work. So I don't compete with anyone. I compete with myself. I just want to do the best work I can, and that needs me to be engaged with other experts, and that to get exposure for their field, I want to lift other researchers up. And so if I'm sharing Ben's work, if I'm sharing Carrie's work, and we're engaging with each other and be like, geez, Ben had a great paper there, Carrie had some really cool perspectives here, check out their work. It's just like society. The more engaged you are with your community, the more you're sharing other people's work, the much closer that community is going to feel, and the better benefit you're going to feel for or get from it. And then it's just the usual like scientific stuff. Like, if you're going to engage on there, engage respectfully. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people that just jump in, and the time it takes to put yourself out there on Twitter, the time it takes to put together threads and different types of content, it takes a lot of time and takes effort. And there's people that just jump in there and there's way overly critical. And this, whether it's Twitter or whether it's in the scientific community as a whole, just be respectful. Like, engage respectfully, offer some insight, but don't act like you're some sort of authority on something, especially if it's a little bit outside of your area. Just have respectful dialogue and you'll be sweet. And the kind of reverse goes in. So there's a lot of really cool dialogue on these different topic areas. And if you look at like dietary topics on Twitter, it can be really controversial because people are set in their other camps. And there's a point at which arguing with a stranger on the internet has no more value. So if you're getting insightful feedback, if you're getting constructive criticism from other people, all good, engage to your heart's content. But there comes a point where people are just trying to bait you into an argument. And the internet is permanent, and what you say back to that person is permanent. So be very careful about how you're engaging and the time you're giving to people, that there may not actually be any benefit. You're not going to change trolls' minds. And that kind of comes back down to impulsive tweeting. So I am grateful that I delete a lot of my comments, because I'll have a full tweet put together. I'll be ready to go and be like, I'm going to show this person. And then I sit on it and go, what is this doing? What is this proving for me? What is this, doing to the conversation? Is it going to actually result in anything beneficial? More often than not, it doesn't. So I leave it. You can delete your tweets. You don't have to engage in every battle. You don't have to tweet impulsively. You can actually save drafts and stuff like that. So you don't have to, the way the Twitter algorithm works is that conversations will stay for the guts of a day. So there is this kind of impetus to be involved somewhat immediately, but you don't have to. You can let that slide. You can come back to it a week later and re-engage if you want. And then I'd offer caution with texting tone. So I'm sure you have this in email and text as well. It's difficult to get your tone of voice across in a text or in a tweet. So just offer caution there with how you're putting yourself out there for fear of being misinterpreted. That's where emojis can help, actually. And then giving up too early. So this is kind of, again, consistently what I see from people who engage in these type of seminars. They go, right, that's cool, I'm going to jump on Twitter. And then you chuck out a tweet next week, and then you don't really know what to say. And then you do another tweet a couple of weeks from now, and you get disheartened because you're not getting engagement. I started being regular on Twitter in 2017, and my follower count is artificial because I started posting ridiculous videos of myself, and I'm up to 11,000 people. But I had the guts of 1,000 people that I was following or following me for the guts of 3 years, and that's where a lot of those opportunities came from. You don't need to have 50,000 followers on Twitter, and at the same time, you can't necessarily expect that your engagement is going to be, off the walls immediately. It takes time to water this. It takes time to build this platform and profile. So I'd encourage you to just kind of keep exploring. Where are we gone? You can still my screen?
Yeah, you're still good. We see
Still good? Cool. Yeah, so don't give up too early. And then some kind of reverse, some tips that I've seen for success. I would encourage you to show your personality. I've met a lot of you on campus and had coffees with different people, and you're all great people. Show that. When we go to conferences, we're strict and we're rigid, and when we talk to informal media, it's super formal and we can't show our personality. This is an opportunity where you get to show some of the personality behind your work, and again, humanize what we're doing. And as I mentioned, kind of related to the other side, if you can engage in productive dialogue, if you're not an ass, basically, you can offer perspective and insight that people might not have had, and that can result in, offering your own perspective, but also potentially result in collaborations as well. If people haven't heard of your perspective before, or you offer or bring something to the table that other people haven't or need, it can be a great way of getting collaborations from it. As I mentioned, kind of in relation to the PubMed profile, the best way you can, when you go to publish or show that you've published a paper, stick together a couple of tweets that are the summary, because it operates like Instagram, it operates like Facebook. People are scrolling quickly through a timeline. So the time it takes them to click on a PubMed link, go to an external site, read your paper, and then go back to Twitter, they're not necessarily on Twitter for that. So the likelihood of someone clicking on the link that you hit and taking them to an external site is very low, versus if you have 2 or 3 tweets or more together with some key pictures from or images from your publication, or maybe some tables, and you offer like the kind of summary of that, it can be a great way to give the highlights to people to make them want to go and engage with your content as well. So I'd encourage you to offer kind of more nuance and context than just kind of, putting a link there without anything else. And this is an important way of kind of the long-term maintenance of your profile. So again, coming back to authenticity, coming back to giving up too early, it can be a really foreign place, Twitter, when you don't really know what it is, you don't really know how it works, what to engage. And you may be comfortable with showing more or less of your personality. What I would offer to you is to try and explore different ways of expressing yourself. Not everything's going to be hit, and the way you tweet may or may not be comfortable with to you. So just try and explore different ways of doing that, and find that one that's kind of easier to maintain in that longer run, and that's going to lead to staying on there longer, staying engaged longer, and all of those other additional benefits that hopefully will come your way. And then batch and schedule content. So you're all exceptionally busy scientists, and whether it's you have a Twitter account for you or you have a Twitter account for your lab, it can be really hard to kind of live tweet. And so what I would encourage you to do in that case, if that's something that is difficult for you to do, is consider batching your content. And that can mean, sitting down one Saturday and going, right, I'm going to have a month worth of tweets. I want to tweet once or twice a week, and I'm going to schedule this out so I don't have to worry about it for a month. There's ways you can do that, and I'll show you that in the next slide. Or what I do is, I'm walking back and forth in my car every day, or I'm walking around. Whenever I have a couple of minutes, thoughts come to me that aren't necessarily suitable for developing a project, but there's perspectives on the field that I'll just chuck down in my notes, chuck down in a Word doc or whatever, and then I, over the course of a week or whatever, collate them and then schedule those tweets or content out across the month. So it can be a better way of strategically putting your content together, so you don't feel the pressure of like, oh, I need to tweet today, I need to put something out today.